What up, artists? My name is Dwayne Jones. I'm the creative director and founder of a lifestyle brand called Art Pays Me. This is the Art Pays Me podcast, and I'm passionate about finding ways that people like you and me can make a living for ourselves off of our creativity. And, maybe we can make the world a better place at the same time. Let's get into it. So, welcome to Art Pays Me. Today we have Deedee. Is it Morris?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this is interesting because I came across you because you asked me to model.
Yeah. I did.
Yeah. So what exactly do you do?
So I'm a photographer. And where to start with that? So, I would say that like my bread and butter for photography is probably families and portraits of women.
Okay.
And then after that, kind of, if I have time and space, I do creative projects for myself, which is where you came into the picture. Is a
Gotcha.
creative project for myself. Yeah. But I also have a degree in counseling therapy, and so I try to use that as much as I can in my photography, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense. It makes a lot of sense, actually.
Okay.
No, because
Yeah.
if you look at Deedee's work, as I did, and I read the captions and things, there's a lot of emotion in each shot. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes even when you can't really see much of what's going on, there's still this sense that there is a deep story going on behind things.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very curious about that because I was like, I feel like you're very deep thinking and very no deep. Deep is like, I'm trying not to use the word deep, but it's really like there is more. There's so much more beneath the surface. It's not just
Mm-hmm.
pretty pictures. There's a lot going on there.
Yes. I It's kind of my goal is to tell people stories, and so I believe that in order to actually tell them, I need to know their story first.
Mm-hmm.
So when I take photos, it's not, the work that I did with you is a little bit different in that, but because it was very much what I wanted to project, not really about you specifically.
Mm-hmm.
But when I take photos of families or like the fine art portraits that I take of females, I spend a lot of time behind the scenes with them first. Like I go back and forth via email or phone calls or Zoom chats or Zoom video, and ask them a lot of questions about who they are and how they connect to the people in their lives and how they connect to themselves. So I get pretty deep with people pretty quickly. I think because I have the training to do so, I can dive right in
Mm-hmm.
without making them feel like afraid of me.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's my goal with what I do, is to really tell people stories. And
Okay.
it becomes more meaningful to me too. And I don't know, like some people don't need to have meaning in what they do, and that's totally fine. But I find that I can sustain myself longer if I do have meaning
Do you
behind
find
what
that
I'm doing.
do you get bored if there's like a bigger story to tell?
Yeah, like I don't take on a lot of weddings because I feel like even though, they have their story, like they have their love story, um a lot of it's just kind of fluffier photos. Like it's, taking pictures of the reception is taking pictures of other people's intoxicated friends. So like it's, yeah, so I don't do a lot of weddings unless they're really small and intimate. Um and yeah, like I think that if I were to just go and meet the family and not know them and just go and take their photos and then leave again, I think I would get bored.
Yeah.
It wouldn't push me to be more creative because I wouldn't necessarily be telling a specific story that's different from someone else's.
Mm-hmm.
So
So,
yeah, I think that knowing somebody's story really actually helps me to push myself creatively.
so because of this, you seem to vet your clients very carefully.
I do.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. My wedding clients, like I really only book like 4 weddings a year because I also don't have a lot of free time to edit weddings because they take a lot longer.
Yeah.
But I book based on their very first email, which has to start with, "I really love your work, and this is why I want to hire you." Yeah, because if they start with "How much do you cost?" I know they're not my clients. Not
Uh-huh.
that I'm like super expensive. It's not, like I'm not like out of the norm in terms of wedding packages, but I just want to make sure that they really want me to be their wedding photographer.
Yeah. As
So,
someone who's had a wedding shot and paid for that,
mhm.
it's important, at least for me, like I trusted my photographer 100%, and
Yeah.
you need that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that translates into any shoot really. Like you really need to trust your photographer because they're there to capture you. So if you don't trust them, then you're not really going to show who you are
Mm-hmm.
in that shoot.
Yeah. So Deedee, let's take it back. Where did you
Hmm.
grow up?
I grew up in Owen Sound, Ontario.
Okay. So what
Yeah.
led you to Nova Scotia?
Well, I went to university in New Brunswick, met my husband there when I was 19 and married him when I was 19 and have
Wow.
been married now for 22 years. I know.
A veteran.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very lucky is what I like to tell people because
Yeah.
seriously, 19. Yeah, and we had only dated for 3 months, so I'm
Wow.
very, very spontaneous person, I guess. Adventurous. And he surfs, so he wanted to move to Nova Scotia. He's from Calgary, and I refused to move to Calgary. And he had no desire to move to Ontario, and neither did I really. So we moved here in
Mm.
2003, I think was when we moved to Nova Scotia to the Eastern Shore.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah.
And I see you incorporate your mother as well.
I am a mother, yes. I have
Yeah.
two girls, they're twins. They're 4 years old. They
Okay.
are intense little creatures. Yeah.
No doubt. No, it's great.
Yeah.
I see you incorporate them into your work and tell those stories. It's very cool.
Yeah, I mean it's hard not to incorporate them because they're inspiring, really. Like they inspire me to push myself and look for new ways to express. So
Hmm.
yeah.
So I get the sense that you were a little bit of a wild child growing up. Is that true?
uh, in some ways I was, and I would say that I was a wild child, but not necessarily in the way that you're thinking.
Hmm.
Like I didn't drink alcohol until I was 20,
Okay.
and I've never done drugs. So in that sense, I am not a wild child like at all,
Hmm.
but I was very much of my own mind. Like my parents especially would really have to explain to me why I couldn't do something if I wanted to do it. And if they couldn't come up with a good explanation, I just would do it. They couldn't stop me. So in that sense, I think like wild, yes, but not in like a party animal sense. I mean, I loved going to parties, but I
Yeah.
just wasn't like interested in intoxication.
Uh-huh. I think I
Yeah.
might have a couple of those daughters myself.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they question everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah, one of mine does for sure. The funny thing is it doesn't actually help me to know how to like talk to her or how
Hmm.
to like help her move through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It puts you in this weird space as a parent where, at least for me as a creative, I love it on one hand. And then the
Hmm.
other hand, I'm like, okay, but I just really need you to do this thing right now. So I don't have to.
It's really hard when you work from home, and like, yeah, boundaries is a big thing that I'm still working on. Like
Yeah,
knowing when I'm working and when I'm not, so that I can just focus on them.
right.
And yeah, it's tricky.
And you've got two at the same time, so
Yeah. Yeah. It's very intense.
yeah. So
Hmm.
you seem like you're very much connected to nature
Hmm.
in a lot of
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in the country,
Okay.
and we had a farm, and I lived in the woods. Like I ran around barefoot all the time. Like that was just my life. And I think there's just something inherent in me, and probably in everybody. But yeah, I'm very much in touch with that part of me that is very connected to nature.
Mm-hmm.
So I very much know when it's necessary to go outside
Yeah.
for myself. Like it's so grounding for me. Yeah.
So so what led you to photography?
I think I've always loved it, even as a little kid. Like, you remember those 110 film cameras? They were like long and rectangular.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah, that was my first camera as a little
Okay.
kid. Yeah. And I just like always loved having it in my hands. And I wasn't taking pictures of anything special. It was like, I mean, it was special to me, but it would have been like, a sunset over and over again.
Mhm.
But and even through high school, I was always the one in the group taking the photos. And then I went to university for literature and history for my undergrad, and just it stayed with me. Like I always took pictures and always was interested in it, but I never really thought of it as like an avenue to like, really concentrate on until I graduated. And then one day I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna like focus on this for a little bit and see if I can learn more and actually like do it
Mhm.
like intentionally.
Yeah.
So I took a class from a lady in St. Andrews, New Brunswick, in her basement, and I borrowed an SLR camera because I didn't have one at the time.
Mhm.
And there was like four of us, I think, in the class. She taught us how to shoot manually using slide film.
Wow.
And yeah, her reasoning for that was because it's the hardest thing to learn on.
Smart.
Because yeah. So I was like, okay, cool. And I still have all those slides somewhere in my house. But that was the first photography class I ever took. And then I took one more at NASCAD, but that was to learn to develop film. And that's it.
How do
That's
you
all the
feel? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say that's all the like any sort of formal education I have in photography.
Okay. So today, are you
Mhm.
shooting primarily digital?
Yes, I
How do
am.
you feel about that transition from film to digital?
It has its pros and cons. I still think film is the best thing to shoot on. Like digital still can't touch it,
Mm.
but it is very convenient to shoot on digital. it's,
Yeah.
it's a lot more cost effective to be shooting with digital.
Right. Right. Do you spend a lot of time in post production in your work?
No, not a ton. I don't do a lot. I try my best to get most of the stuff done in camera. Um, but yeah, I like, I tweak a little bit in post, but not a ton.
Oh,
So it takes me like 3 hours maybe to do like a 1.5 to 2 hour shoot to edit it.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
which is like I would say that's like maybe like going through like 800 images
That's
ish.
really good.
Yeah.
Sheesh.
Yeah, I've got it down. I've got it down, and I don't use Lightroom. This is the other thing. I don't use Lightroom. I know a lot of photographers are like, "Oh, you got to use it," but I didn't learn on Lightroom because I learned before Lightroom was a thing.
Right.
So I learned on Photoshop, and I just have never taken the time to learn Lightroom. But I don't know. Photoshop works for me, so that's what I do.
That's kind of me too. I not that I'm a photographer, but when I do
Mhm.
shoot, there are times when
Mhm.
I try to open up Lightroom and I just like, I don't have the energy to teach myself this thing. This
That
is
is
Photoshop.
exactly it. It's the energy part. I'm not very technological, like, I have a very steep learning curve when it comes to technology,
Hmm.
and so I just know that I know what I know, and I can play with what I know a little bit, but to, like, learn a whole new program is very daunting to me.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it's just not worth it, to be honest.
Yeah. Mhm.
If you got something that works for you. And
Yeah.
yeah, you're fantastic at what you do. So I don't, I think it works.
Yeah, I think it
Um,
works.
so you're, so I'll take it to the thing that drew me to you is
Mhm.
this project, Shifting
Mhm.
Polarities.
Mhm.
And you had the tagline, the subtitle of Portraits of Renewable Abundance.
Mhm.
So in the description, it says these portraits explore the fluid spaces of gender and our connection with non-human world, both organic and synthetic, from a range of masculine identifying perspectives. My
Mhm.
hypothesis is that there is not one gender or world without the other, without flow
Mhm.
between these polarities. I
Mhm.
I love the concept. You hooked me right away with it, and
Cool.
then your work, I was like, oh yeah, I trust this person to do something amazing. So what
Yeah.
what made you want to explore gender in this way when you typically shoot women?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Last summer I conceived of this project about 3 years ago, and I there was something that just was keeping me back from actually just going for it. I don't know what it was. I didn't feel quite ready to, like, jump into it. Logistically, it felt a little bit difficult and out of my realm. Just, like, organizing all the people, all the flowers, and I'm, like, actually I know a lot of people have a hard time believing this, but I'm actually an extroverted introvert. So it's I come across as very extroverted, but inside I'm like, eek. So yeah, so stepping outside of my comfort zone is not that easy when it comes to people. And so I just kind of put it on the shelf and just, like, let it sit there and kind of grew a vision board for it over the years. And then last summer, I was teaching a workshop at an arts festival in New Brunswick, and they asked me to teach about heart led photography, and I was like, yeah, yeah, okay, that's fine. I ended up talking a lot about not even talking, really just, like, holding a space for people to be vulnerable with each other in this place.
Mm.
And so I, like, led them through a bunch of different activities. I made them partner up and stare at each other for 5 minutes, like, looking into each other's eyes. Yeah, it was intense. Um, but it was amazing. And what happened was is at the end of there was like 5 guys there,
Hmm.
and at the end, one of them asked me why I don't ever shoot men.
Hmm.
And I don't know if he was, like, looking for some, like, profound feminist answer or something, but all I said was, they never asked me. I've never been asked by a man to photograph him. So I was like, I would love to. That'd be great. But no one's ever asked me. He was kind of shocked by the answer. But then it like kind of it triggered me and was like, okay, so maybe I just don't wait for them to ask, and I should just ask them. So
Hmm.
that was when I was like, okay, I think I'm actually ready to do this shoot now. And that night, I got an email from Alan Nielsen, who is part of the Viewpoint Gallery, asking me to do a solo show in February.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, well, this feels a little bit like kismet. Like, maybe I should actually try to pull this off in the next 4 months and try get it printed and, framed and all of that kind of stuff and gallery ready. And so I wrote him back and I was like, I would love to, as long as you're okay with me doing something totally new. And he was fine with it. So that was the start of it, was like, okay, so these two things just kind of clicked together, And I think I just was a lot more ready now than I was 3 years ago.
Very
And yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, so that's kind of how it came like the idea of shooting this came about, but the like larger thing came because 3 years ago I just ended doing a project with women that was, I think 40 women were involved in it. And it was all about exploring female vulnerability and like how females connect to themselves. And I called it We Are the Wild. And so the next step for me was to then explore male vulnerability. And I think like the word vulnerable is so associated with the female that I kind of turned it into this, like, you know, how to do this in a way that like draws out male vulnerability and explores the feminine in the male.
Mm-hmm.
So like when I say gender, you know, that brings up so many things for so many people, like so many different things for so many people. But for me, it's about energy. It's about like, we all have masculine energy in us, and we all have female energy in us.
Right.
And so to me, the world can't run with only one of those.
Mm-hmm.
So if everybody were able to like fully embrace both sides, man, this place would be awesome.
I agree. You know what? I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think like that was partially what really drew me to this because as a masculine identifying person,
mhm,
I often found myself in situations growing up and sometimes today still where I'm confronted with, well, as a man, you're supposed to do this, or you're supposed
mhm,
to feel this, or you're not supposed to feel certain things.
yeah,
And sometimes my reality was going against those things.
yeah,
And, you start to feel like, what does this mean? I'm not a man, or
mhm,
whatever the case may be, or
mhm.
does it matter that I'm a man? Does it, so, like all these, eventually you hit a certain age, at least for me, I just was like, I don't give a fuck what any of these people think. I'm just going to be me
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
throw out all the gender rules and just do what makes sense
Mhm.
for me.
And
And
that's, sorry, I'm
no, go
interrupting.
go for it. Yeah.
Um, that's where I kind of feel like I wanted to bring the flowers in, because to me it was like it's kind of inevitable that we end up feeling both.
Yeah.
And so like for the man, it's kind of inevitable that the female energy will erupt at certain times in their lives and take over. And that doesn't mean that that you're trans or that you're gay or that you're anything but who you are. It just means that you're listening to that side
Mm-hmm.
or to that part of you.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I just like really wanted the flowers to like look like they were kind of erupting from the men and from the space that they were in, because
Uh,
I just feel like it's an inevitability. Like for me, it's inevitable that I am going to be listening at times to my masculine energy more than my female energy, because I need to get shit done. And let's just be frank, like men have the ability to get shit done. Females tend to be a little more slow. And
right.
this is of course generalizing,
Yes.
but yeah, like the associations are there with the females, and of course there are like females that feel more masculine than feminine, but we have all of it in us.
Yeah.
And listening to both sides is actually super helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Like in my relationship, my wife's female identifying, but she
Mhm.
definitely has more of the get shit done mentality than I
Yeah,
do.
yeah, I love those females.
Yeah,
I
and
love those people.
I could sense, like, when I hear some guys talk, like they're very threatened when they date a woman who feels that way, and I never
Hmm.
felt uncomfortable with it. I think my
Hmm.
mother's kind of similar, so maybe that's why. Uh,
Okay.
it's I just find it interesting.
Hmm.
Uh, But then it also at times, I know my wife would like want me to just know the right thing to do in certain situations, and
Mhm.
it's like, I just don't know. I'm not there.
That's why you married her.
Exactly, and I'm like, you can handle this. It's okay, and I'll support. But
Yeah.
then there are times when I have to also remind myself like, it's my turn to like kick in and step up and do what I need to do. So,
Yeah,
um,
I think it's like a balance, right? Like it's finding not even a balance. I actually don't really like using that word. I like the word harmony
yeah,
better because I think it's like harmonizing the two to like find a really good rhythm.
hmm yeah, and it's not always easy, but like, yeah, I
Mhm.
am fully into like sort of slipping in between and just
Mhm.
figuring out what works for you.
Mhm.
And yeah, because I've addressed gender in some of my work before as well.
Mhm.
It's just the idea of it. I think I love the way society's going, where we're really taking the time to consider what it means. And
Yeah, me too.
yeah.
It's really cool.
So, have you had any major creative influences on you?
Any major I mean, I studied a bit of art history, and so I would say that yeah, like um I would say that Rembrandt is a very major influence
Wow.
on me. His use of lighting is pretty amazing, and I try to like replicate that a lot in the way that I shoot. Um, which is like just I focus a lot on the shadows instead of the light. Like I should say that I shoot for the light so that the shadows are apparent.
hmm
Um, and yeah, so I would say that Rembrandt would be a big one. Um, there's a lady she lives in Nashville. Her name is Joy Prouty. She's a family photographer, and she's always been a really big influence on me. The way that she approaches shooting families and understanding them and knowing their story and kind of getting to the heart of the matter real quick.
hmm
I took a workshop by her actually in 2011 maybe, and when she was living in Washington, and that was really really great.
hmm
So yeah, she would be another photographer that has had a lot of influence on me. Um, Otherwise, I actually try hard not to be influenced
I feel that.
by other people.
I feel that.
I feel like Instagram is amazing in terms of like it can go both ways. Like you can feel really inspired to push yourself, or you can feel like you just need to crawl in a hole and give up.
Seriously.
So so I try to just like I try to see that as a whole as being inspirational and like applauding everybody who's on there and putting themselves out there.
Yeah.
But I also, I also just know that I want my stuff to be unique to me as much as that is possible.
hmm
So I try not to like be influenced that much by what other people are doing.
Yeah. You know what though? I studied art history too, and as soon as you said Rembrandt, I was like, I see it. I see it in your
Yeah,
work. Even some of the facial
totally.
expressions from people
Yeah,
kind of remind me.
yeah.
So, do you like, if there was one piece of advice, would it be that, just that, like, try to, you have your influences, but don't necessarily get too wrapped up?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so huge. And like just exploring and playing and having fun with the tool that you have, which for me it's the camera. For
hmm
someone else it might be a paintbrush.
Right.
I think like, you know, finding and exploring your own creative voice is like a huge thing. And I teach workshops on that, like just to get people out of their heads and step away from themselves to just like almost just getting out of the way. Like Freeman Patterson actually writes a lot about that. He's a New Brunswick photographer,
hmm
and he writes a lot about he has a book called The Art of Seeing,
Okay.
and he writes in there about getting out of your own way to be able to see things. And I love it because it's so true. Like if you're in your head so much about, you know, what other people are going to think or what it's going to look like or how it's going to turn out, just who cares? Just try it. Have fun. Play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So, Shifting Polarities, I went to
Mm-hmm.
see it the other day. Great. I really love it.
Thank
And
you.
it's still on until March 1st.
Yep.
So anyone who's in Halifax, please make sure you check it out. Is there anything coming out that you want to promote or talk about?
I have another retreat coming up for female photographers. If anyone's listening and looking for a place to come and learn from me and from each other, we will be talking a lot about creative voice in that and inviting emotion into your sessions with your clients and vulnerability and getting past a little bit of, you know, fears and things that might be holding you back from taking your next step with whatever that might be for you. And yeah, so that's at the end of March 27th to 30th, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet.
And it's in Nova Scotia.
In Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
All right. So where can people find you online?
DeedeeMorris.com.
All right. Sweet.
Right. Thank you so much for having me here.
No, thank you for doing the show and thank you for doing the work that you do. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to the Art Pays Me podcast. Thank you to Langy Beats for the theme music. If you got anything out of this show, please rate, review, and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. The more you do this, the more reach the podcast gets and the more artists I can help learn to make a living at what they love. If you want to know more about what I do, hit me up at artpaysme.com or at artpaysme on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and Pinterest. See y'all next time.